My name is Nikki Mozo, and I live in Hawaii. I've been living in Hawaii for 26 years. And I came there when I was 18 years old. I was raised in New Zealand, but I was actually born in Singapore. My father was in the New Zealand Army, and so that's why he was stationed in Singapore when I was born. My mother is from England, and her father died when she was 3 years old, and her mother remarried and they left England and settled in New Zealand. And when she was 20 years old, she met and married my father. They divorced when I was a year old. And my father was still in Singapore, and my mother came back to New Zealand. And so it was my brother and I, and my mother was a single mom in the early 70s. And I know that that was difficult for her. She ended up marrying a man when I was 5, and they had 3 children together. But it made it really difficult. It made my childhood really difficult because I had this stepfather that was just not kind to me, and actually ended up being really abusive. And so we had, I think, 8 or 9 years of a lot of violence in our home, and ended up in a shelter, in a women's shelter. So we lived in, we lived in a small room, just our family, and there were other families in the house, and it was just very awkward and strange. And I wasn't doing very well. I think by this time I was about 13 years old, and I wasn't going to school. I didn't have the best friends. And I remember one day I'd left school and I was walking across these train tracks, because in New Zealand that's how I got to school. And I felt a very clear impression. I don't know if it was Heavenly Father or my ancestors, but I heard almost a voice say, whatever your life is going to be is up to you. And what you're doing right now is not going to help you. And so I thought about that for a long time and thought, how can I get out of my situation? I'm living in this shelter. I'm just not doing well. And I thought about my father, who I hadn't really had any communication with because my mother didn't really allow that. And he wasn't that close. We weren't in the same city. So I got on a bus for about 5 hours, and I sat on his doorstep until he came home. And at first he was very surprised. He was just like so surprised to see me there. And I asked him if he would help me, if he would pay for me to go to boarding school. And he agreed, and so he did. And so the next year, which was probably like 6 months later at this point, I started boarding school, which in New Zealand is really not that strange. There's quite a few of them. But making that one decision to go to boarding school really changed my life, because in that environment I was homesick, and I was only 14 years old, and it was really difficult. But I was away from a lot of dysfunction, and I could grow. I could focus on me and not the things that were attached to my family. And so I went to boarding school, and I was there for 4 years, and I gained a testimony of Christ, and had the opportunity to dance, to learn my culture, because my mother is English and my father is Maori, and I didn't really know what that meant to be a Maori woman. And I didn't feel like, I don't look English. I didn't identify very much as being an English woman. And so it really helped me kind of find my identity and learning how to dance my culture. And I loved the way that that felt. And so I was able to thrive and learn Tahitian and Samoan and Hawaiian. And I joined a culture group in school which toured New Zealand. And from that opportunity, I got a scholarship to dance at PCC, at the Polynesian Cultural Center. And so for me, leaving high school, I didn't have other options except I could go to Hawaii and study at BYU, and it would be paid for if I just danced. So I thought that was an awesome opportunity. And so at 18, I left my home in New Zealand and my siblings, and I went to Hawaii. And I had fun. I really enjoyed dancing, and I met my husband. You know, he worked at the Polynesian Cultural Center, and he was in a couple of my classes, and so that's how we met. And we started our lives together. We had 4 children, and he started a business, and I graduated from college, and we, you know, moved to different states, and we just, like many families, you know, we just kind of worked and had children and had goals and dreams. And we lived on the East Coast, where he was getting more photography experience because he was a photographer. And then he said that, you know, we needed to go back to Hawaii and settle there and start our life. And he did, and he started his business. And because he needed to start his business, I needed to work full time to make the money so that he could put, you know, money into his business. And so I worked full time for a while, and he started his business. And I remember we had 2 children, and we prayed about whether or not we should have more. And we felt very strongly that we had, you know, another child to have. And so at that point, I quit my job so that I could be a mom. And that was kind of a leap of faith for me, because all of my salary was paying out bills. But I just felt so strongly that Heavenly Father would bless us in this goal that we had to have another one, and He really did. When I was free to be home with my children, He was able to focus on building His business, and that's what happened. It really, really built up, and he got really good at what he was doing and really well respected for it. And he loved the ocean. He was a surfer, but he was a surf photographer as well. So he was always in the ocean. And shooting in the ocean, you have to hold your camera and tread water. And he was getting shots like inside of the big waves. And one day in February of 2005, he was shooting the waves, and I guess it just picked him up and threw him on the reef and knocked him out. And nobody really saw it happen, and so he drowned. And at that time, our children, my son had just turned 12. And I had 3 girls that were 9, 7, and 2, almost 3. So they were really little. And we had just moved to a new community. And it's really interesting because he had told me that he had premonitions, that he was going to die young. And I wasn't really sure exactly what that meant, but it was really just a month or 2 later that he actually died. But he had set up a lot of things for us, which kind of just helped me realize that he knew that he was going to die. And one of those things, which we actually didn't find till a year later, was a note that said, if I die, it's fine. It said, I've lived a good life. The ocean has given me so much. The day will come that it will take and I will give. He said, I love you all. I'll always watch over you. And so I was mad at him for thinking that it was fine. But I mean, I think that his perspective was so much more eternal and eternal and spiritual, in the sense that he really felt like his mission coming to earth and being sealed for eternity to his love and having his children was his goals, and he had accomplished them. And he wasn't by any means putting himself in danger on purpose or anything like that, but just living his life the way that he was passionate about his job and creating images so that other people could see how beautiful the ocean is and how amazing these waves are. And he just wanted to share that, and in doing that, he just knocked his head and drowned. So for the past 11 years, I've been raising my children. And wow, it's been beautiful and difficult. We've learned so much. I think we've grown so close, but it's been so hard. The kids have grieved. I've grieved. And in the beginning, I just felt like my life had to be almost a testament to my love to him, and I've held on so tightly to that. And just recently, in this last year or so, I have felt his encouragement to let go of him a little, and I've always felt his approval of what I'm doing. I've always felt him say, like, I'm so grateful, I'm so proud of you. But it's different now, because it's like, I know you love me, and I want you to have joy. I want you to find joy in your own life that you still have. I'm 45 years old now. I was 34 when he passed away. And there's something here for me to do. And so I'm finding what that is. Since he passed away, I went back to school and got a master's degree in social work. And so for the past 2 years, I've been working in a nonprofit as a social worker with other families that have loss and grief in their life. And so that's been really rewarding for me to be able to relate to a lot of the families that I work with and help them kind of through their process. I've also been just really spending time with my children. One of the things that was a dream of mine was to travel with them. And because I live in New Zealand, I felt like it was time to go back and visit my family. And so I told my children a few years ago that we were going to go to New Zealand, and they said, well, we always go to New Zealand, and New Zealand is really close to Bali, and we love to surf, so can we go there? And I agreed, well, yeah, that shouldn't be too bad. We can go to Bali. And then my other daughter said, like, oh, I heard Thailand is amazing. We need to go there. And so I agreed. And my middle daughter was reading a book about a teenager that was working in Africa with an orphanage. And she just said, like, I'd really like to go there. And I'd always had a dream to take my children on a service trip to volunteer and to really see these situations. And so I started researching the possibility, and I found out once you sort of pay to go halfway across the world anyway, it's really not that much more to just go around the world. And so we planned out a trip to visit about 14 countries. We found orphanages and schools that we wanted to serve, and we kind of organized those things ahead of time, got all of our shots, and I just told them we're taking one backpack each. That's it. And they complained about that, said they needed a suitcase with wheels and all those kinds of things. But, it's like, no, we just, whatever we need, we're going to carry. And, there was just so much learning and that on the whole trip of the things that we realized we don't need so much. And so We, about 3 summers ago, we traveled around the world as a family, and we're just so grateful for the opportunity to do that, to be a team in this project together and really see what others don't have and how grateful they are for the little things that they have. You know, when I was about 8 years old, and probably even before that, but I remember really feeling Heavenly Father's love. And it was interesting because I didn't have my biological father in my life, and I grieved for him my whole life, and he's actually still alive. But I kind of feel like I missed out. I missed out on having him and the benefit of his counsel and his love in my life. And that's been really hard for me. Which is interesting because how can you know, a lot of people think, how can you grieve for something you've never really had? And because my 2-year-old was only 2, well, she was only 2 when her dad died, a lot of people assume that. But you can grieve for something that you wish you had, or that you should have. And that grief is very real. And I felt my Heavenly Father's love, and because I had a stepfather that was very abusive, I just knew Heavenly Father loved me. And that the things that were happening to me as a child were not because of me. And it's been such a gift in my life because I've learned that other people can choose to hurt you and mistreat you, but that's on them. But it did take me some years to really let go of it all. Like, I thought that I'd let go of it, but then when I got married and a lot of, you know, intimate moments that had been tainted, and it came up again, you know. So I did have to really, really process that again and really understand that if a person that hurts me doesn't fix it for themselves, they'll be accountable, and that my Savior will take care of it, and that I can let that go. And I think just having that foundation, even in my grief, I knew that Heavenly Father hadn't abandoned me. But there was a time when I was kind of mad at him, and it wasn't the first year or even the second, but in the 3rd year, I mean, my adrenaline was running out, and I realized, like, you might have to do this for 50 more years, you know, and I wasn't sure if I could do it, and I sort of just stopped talking to Heavenly Father because I thought he was mean. And I learned really quickly that didn't work for me. And I'm grateful that I learned that, because I was able to go back to doing what I know does work. And so what works for me is just allowing myself to feel his love and all of my imperfections. Like, you know, raising teenagers alone was rough, and they make mistakes, and I made mistakes as their parent. But just forgiving myself and allowing myself to move forward in all of our imperfection, and knowing that Heavenly Father understands. He's so much more loving and kind than we sometimes allow ourselves to believe. You know, that, well, if I don't do this or I do it this way, it's, you know, am I going to make it? And it's like, we're going to make it, because he loves us and he gets it. And so just allowing that, you know, that in my life, allowing myself to be imperfect has helped me, because then it lets me embrace things. And, you know, one of those things has been, because like I said in the beginning, I don't have family. My husband has a small family and a great family, but I never really had sisters, you know, with me on my journey. So So I found sisters along my way, and that was just in the form of beautiful friends that have become such a huge support system to me. Their love and support and guidance and counsel, and mostly love, has really helped me get through this process. I really think the way that I've gotten through this is to allow people in my life to serve me in the way that they want to, you know, and however naturally that was for them, but just to let them love me and serve me. I've had the support of sisters that have just helped me get through, and it's eternal, and that will help me till the day I die.